Hi, everyone. Thank you for coming to this workshop or camp. I hope you're having a great time and really enjoying your presentations. This presentation is about weather the storm, right? And this is going to help you with hide placement, whether you're practicing with your own dog or whether you're instructing, and give you some things to work on with your clients and things like that. So this is something, and I'm also a CO, and I think about it all the time when I go to different places to set hides and all that. So it really helps you with your training goals and what you're setting, and really be more thoughtful about what you're working on. Again, whether you're an instructor or whether you are a somebody who just wants to work with their dog, setting up different scenarios. Because as many of you, those of you who've competed or that have been out in the world there in nose work, the weather can change in an instant, right? And so it's important that in our training we start really working or looking to um, get our dogs used to the different weather conditions, and also learn what our dogs look like in certain weather conditions in order to be able to have a good strategy on in your competition as well as in your training. And if there's an issue, you really are clear about what the issue is. It may not be the hide place, it may be the weather, all those kind of things. And I know everybody talks about it, so hopefully you'll gather some good tips and information on how to practice some of the weather conditions and odor, and just kind of look at it with a different with a different lens, right? And see how that can help you. So, why you want to understand it? You understand how scent behaves in different weather conditions. Also, how your dog also performs in different weather conditions. For example, if you have a dog that's not very heat tolerant, then maybe it's just something to think about. Or they have a difficult time in the heat, that's going to affect how they're going to work, right? And you want to really think about all those things, and make decisions based on that, right? I have a shepherd that is not very heat tolerant, so I don't compete with him in the summer. He doesn't. I do maybe half a day or short ones, but I don't do a full day because he's very clear about it, how much he doesn't like it. And then the scent, the how the stability of the odor and the hide and the source, and what it's going to do in different weather conditions, and what to do to adapt it, or to um, to help with the training. So these are really important. I know a lot of people. I'm a lot more, I thin it very thin, in that I want to know, okay, is it the rain or is it the temperature? Is it, what is it that's causing either the dog to be okay with it, or the dog if he's having an issue? Um, I I have a very competitive clientele. We do all dog sports, agility. We do a lot of nose work. So we really focus a lot on getting our students out. We do a lot of field trips. We go a lot of different places, and we work in all kinds of different weather. So the dog, when they go to a trial, and let's say it's a beautiful day, and then in the afternoon it's pouring rain, um, our the dogs and the humans are ready to handle that. Um, Okay, so really some basic things, scent behavior. Warm temperatures increase volatility of odors. Um, they make them more intense, but they also dissipate more quickly. They start moving, and they dissipate them a little quickly. And colder temperatures, if worked in the cold, um, it's harder for the dogs to catch the odor, right? In the heat or in the warm, they can catch that odor and work it to source. In the cold, it's a little harder. So the odor is not as available in the cold weather as it would be in the summer. And I know that's really basic, but that's really important to understand. The reason is because if your dog is taking too long to work a problem, you kind of think about, oh, it's kind of cold, or you might need to, they should take you to odor. Well, if it's really cold, it might be harder. You might have to get a little closer to, you might need to get into more places where the dog can pick up the odor versus when it's warmer. So those are things to think about as you're strategizing in competition and in training, right? You want to see if it's 30 degrees and you put a hide somewhere, you want to be able, is your dog going to be able to understand that? And where, how far away does he have to be to catch it? Where you would put the same hide in the same location in a warm situation, he might pick it up much further away. So those are all things you want to know about your dog and about what, what you're working on. And also, like I talked to before, what the dog's comfort and their performance in those temperatures. You need to know, does your dog care about rain? Does your dog care about the heat? Does, overworking them in the heat, how old your dog is, because at some point that becomes a thing, right? If your dogs get, older dogs have a little harder time with heat tolerance and things like that, or cold. So you want to know, these are all questions that should be answered before you go into a competition. You want to know, you want to work on them in a training scenario to see where they're at. And it's just something to consider. And as your dog is getting older, where before maybe they didn't have a problem with cold or heat, and now they do, it's something, then it's just what it's going to look different how they work those problems. Because a lot of times, and you'll see in some of the videos I have, some of the handlers, the dogs needed more time to work out the problem, and they weren't able to because they didn't have the time to do that, right? So it's something to really think about as your dogs. Also, if you have a young dog, um, same things apply, right? If your dog is young, working in the heat or in the cold might be difficult for them versus working in a moderate temp. And also, if you're a traveler and you like to go different places to trial, you need to know what your dog's going to do in that, like if you're in California where it's really warm all the time and you're going up where it's going to be cold, your dog may work a little differently, and you need to have that in the back of your mind when you're designing or you're thinking about what you're going to do as far as a strategy to compete. And so here you have how the weather affects the stability. And we're going to do rain is a big one, right? It washes the scent and moves it all over depending on where it is. And also the really hot conditions. So I'm going to talk a lot about that. There's always something in the middle, but those two seem to cause the most angst for handlers. Um, and also when you're going to be working in for competitions. Here it says, locations for trainer competitions. Well, we don't have a lot of choices when it comes to the competition. We we're going to be where we're going to be, right? But that's why we need to train for it, right? The trials go on in cold, in rain, in heat. The only thing that might pause a trial is lightning, right? So if you're going to be in that situation or put your dog in that situation, you should have had that experience before that, the first time being at a trial. So really important. So we're going to talk a little bit about the properties of the odors that we use. Again, if you want more scientific stuff, you can look it up, and I might be able to post some stuff on the um, on the properties of the odors. But basically, it's we really want to understand the volatility of each of the odors that we use, right? How volatile, how much do they move, and how often they, and how they behave under certain conditions, because that'll give you, and that's when you're training, you also want to think about what odors you're using and where and why, and also if you're using a combination of them, which one, what odors would you use to work on this particular problem, right? So volatility, what is it? It's what how the liquid how the oil goes from liquid to a vapor, right? That's what volatility is. Some of them are faster than others, and it doesn't mean they're better or worse. It's just what it is, right? So it's one of those things that you definitely want to consider when you're training, and also so you know what that looks like for your dog. So, for example, the ones that evaporate quickly. So we're going to talk a little bit about the volatility of the oils we use. Birch oil is pretty volatile. So birch is usually pretty easy to find in the heat, but it disperses more and it moves more. And you'll see some videos that's going to show that. Versus a cooler, um, more moist, it lasts longer in the cold. And when it's like I'm in Chicago, so it's cold now. So when we put odor out here in this temperature, it's it's really easy for the dogs to find it, and they don't have too much trouble at all. The where it's different is where they catch the odor that little bit different, right? So it's a little bit, it's a relatively volatile, so that means it moves quickly, it moves a little quicker, which is why you can find it easier or get to, or they can catch that scent quicker. Anise is more moderate. Um, it evaporates when it's really hot, like, higher degrees. And if you've ever left your anise oil in the car in the winter, it crystallizes. So, so it becomes a lot heavier in the cold weather. So that's kind of what you're looking at and with anise. So a lot of people say, "Oh, my dogs don't like anise." It's maybe not that they don't like it. It's just that the way it moves, it's not as stable in the hot weather, versus in the cold weather, it does a little bit better, right? So something to consider. And uh, birch or clove oil is less volatile, so it's tends to be a more stable odor. So the dogs have a lot less trouble with clove. And and it's not really trouble, it's just the way they work the odor. So it's when you're training and when you're working on stuff, you should work an odor and kind of see how your dog reacts to it in a certain environment, and then set up a different odor maybe another day in that, so you can kind of look and see how they respond to it. So and really this is effective for you to understand how your dog how they react to the odor, not so much if it's better or worse, because the odors we use are the odors we use, and we've been using them forever, and they're great. It's just a matter of learning what your dog looks like on those odors in those different temperatures that you want to learn. It'll give you the confidence and the calm to know that doesn't matter what the temperature is, your dog's going to be able to do just well. A lot of people get hung up on this. Oh, well, it's anise and he doesn't like it, or it's this and he doesn't like that. It's not about that. It's about how the dog is working that particular essential oil in that particular temperature and that particular setup. That's all it is. So understanding and knowing that is really helpful, and exposing your dog to every possible um, situation, even though it's almost impossible to do all of it. It's because the weather is going to be what it is, depending on where you live. You might have a more stable, even though these days the temperatures are interesting. Anyway, so really quickly, cool and dry, they tend to evaporate a little slower, and they kind of hang out there. But again, as we talked about, the odor trails are less available. The dogs have to work a little harder to get to the odor, to the scent, to the source of the odor. So that's something to consider when you're working in the cold, like where it's not, maybe not snowing, just cold and not damp, right? So they might need a little more time. So I have so I'm gonna take a pause here really quick. Do you have any questions about what we've covered so far before we get into the information on the videos and all that stuff? So I wanted to kind of stop here and see if you had
Sure.
any questions so far.
Yeah, so we don't have too many yet, but there is one question about, do you have any tricks or ideas on how to mock weather conditions in training, like using a sprinkler hose or something like that? Do you ever, try to
Yeah.
simulate it?
Yes, we've had rarely, but we've had some situations here that we didn't have a lot of. It's been really hot, and we weren't able to work on um uh, like after a rainstorm or whatever, because depending on when your classes are or your training sessions are, you may not have the luxury of that, right? So we've actually taken a hose and wet the ground and put a hide on it, or wet the grass and put a hide on that. When we went some a couple of years ago, we went through a long period with a lot of rain, and it was really dry, and so wanting to work on those conditions. So yes, um, you can simulate those for sure. Yes. So yeah, that would be a sprinkler system would be great. Or you can get creative and think of surfaces, right? You can, so do a hide on maybe on cement, maybe do it on grass, maybe do it on something else. So you can use different surfaces to work some of that. If if the weather is, temperate. Like I know in Vegas, it's very dry. So because I've done a few seminars there and it's very dry and unfortunately sometimes we have to throw in, do some water and add that to help the dogs kind of work through that if they're going to be traveling.
Are you going to talk about how altitude affects odor um, or later today, or if not, would you discuss a little bit about altitude?
Sure. I didn't, I altitude really it depends on the pressure stuff, but it's the same, right? The altitude, and it really does affect the organism more than it affects the odor, if you will, right? Because it's in if it's closer, because it'd be a little hotter or it'd be a little more wet or whatever, depending on or a little less, you know, uh, I think in the out like in Colorado, um, the odor moved pretty similarly than they moved in other places. It's just how the dogs handled the altitude and the uh how the odor moves, but it doesn't change it as much. It's really the if it's hotter or the air is a little thinner, it might not move, it might move fat, might be more volatile in a higher altitude. So, which
And
means
do you do anything to, or suggest anything to acclimate dogs ahead of time when they're working in high altitude?
that's tough because we've had that's really hard because it's very difficult to simulate a higher altitude because unless you go on a hill or it's very challenging. The only we've had our some of our what I recommend for our students that want to travel that and I've had a few that go to Colorado. They go the day before and or a couple of days and make a vacation out of it, and they stay a few days in the area before going to trial so the dogs they acclimate to the space. that's that's been that seems to be the most effective, but it's very difficult to simulate altitude. Very hard.
And as a CO, do you take weather into consideration when you pick your hides and your odors?
I do. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. All the time. Yes. It is first and foremost, right? And I look at the forecast of the day, what the morning looks like and what the afternoon looks like. Because what it looks like in the morning is may not be um what it's gonna be in the afternoon. So yes, I do. All the time. And sometimes Mother Nature just makes has her own mind and does her own thing. And she, sometimes it's like I've had a trial where it looked like it was gonna be sunny all day and warm and all that, and in the afternoon, the skies opened up and then we had a torrential downpour. And it wasn't anywhere, it never showed up anywhere. But um, I think now this was early on when I first started a long time ago. I think now we we can see it coming a little quicker, a little bitter. So, but yeah, it can happen no matter what, right? So yes, I do. I always take um weather into consideration when I'm setting my heights. Absolutely.
All right, let's move on and we can come back to some other questions later.
Okay. All right. So cold temperatures, you can tell I'm from Chicago. Colder air holds less. So you want to think about how when you're working your dog, it can dry out their nasal passages. So just uh, be careful about that, right? And they might need more time to work out a problem, the problems and stuff like that. So you want to think about that as you move, and the volatility is less. So this is where you would need to make sure your dog gets everywhere. And not that I'm kind of really big on the dog driven search um model. I like that a lot, but in sometimes in the cold weather the dog may not pick up that scent as easily when it's cold, so you might have to help the get the dog where they may be able to pick up that odor, because in the cold conditions um that might create a problem, right? So here we have a vehicle search, and this is an NW2. They know there's a little bit of snow, so but it's very cold as you can tell. And the dog, the hide was in the license plate of this red car here. And you could tell he didn't he acknowledged it, but it wasn't strong enough for him to get it. So he had to go back to it and get a little closer, even though I felt he was close enough in that setup. He still didn't he didn't catch it right away. So like if we want to watch it again, you can see um he was there, but you see past, but it wasn't quite, and it wasn't close enough, and he didn't quite pick it up right away because it was because of the the temperature. So the handler saw the little head nod, and then she was able to get him much closer. So in this case, you saw how he needed to get really close onto that car. It doesn't mean that you're going to put the dog on a make him hug that car, because that's not it either. You need to let the dog be able to work the wind if there's wind in that situation. Oops, sorry guys. Um, in that situation. But you want to really think about that. Um, so yeah, you want to think about that when you're working it, right? So couple of practices I want you to think about when you're in the cold weather, right? So in snow and ice, if you want to practice on that, which is not so fun. You can put the scent in the snow or place it on an icy surface to teach the dog how to locate the odor that's a little trapped or not or dampened by precipitation. So you can put it like on, if the grass is cold or frozen, you could put a tin in there. So they have to work through that because it's not going to be as easily available for a ground search. Or you can put it, on a little bit of a, and that you can kind of simulate. I'll be honest, you can probably take some stuff out of the some ice and put a hide near that so the dog has to work that situation, that particular uh problem, right? So those are things you can do. That if you live in a place where you have snow and weather, then it'll be available to you. If you live in a place that doesn't have that, you can simulate it with, you know, you can get some ice and put it, and you can, work on some of that stuff so that the dogs get used to seeing that again. And this is also if you travel. If you stay in your part of the world and you don't really travel much, then you do what you want. But this is a really nice way to kind of practice, and we do this often. We'll put a hide where there's a little bit of snow. We I try not to bury it because you know the dog, I don't, I'm not really crazy about that, but I just put it near where the dog has to work on and locate it. So I might put it on the base of a chair where there's snow around it, things like that. Those are little things you can do to kind of give yourself that that the ability to uh have that experience, or give that your dog that experience. All right. Warm and dry conditions. So heat uh rises and it goes up and around. So this is, and most of you have maybe seen this, where the height is one place, but it really is falling on other places. And this is where the dog driven search is so important, because the dog is telling us where the odor's going, right? The dog is telling us where it's going and dissipating, and what they need to work it out. And this is why you want to do this in training. And remember, the hotter it is, the more that odor is going to dissipate and fall on different things, or get on different surfaces. So the dogs are gonna need to maybe go further than they normally would. And this is where we then become panicky and say, oh, he's not working. So here we have uh, a search. It's a hot day for this team. Um, I forgot to turn the sound off, so I apologize. But anyway, it's very hot. The dog is panting. Um, and so here the dog is telling us along that wall that odor is moving on that wall, right? And you'll see the hide is in this little cubby on this on like a door card thing. But she's telling us that the odor is moving all the way down here. But you have to give the dog the ability to figure that out, right? And so here we have, she's again panting, she's giving him odor behavior. And again, move, and there's another hide in the on the ground here. So this was, and I'm gonna spoiler alert, it was not in a successful search for this team. Um, but she did not pick up, and there's some sun and some shade, and it's hotness in the shade. It's just warm weather. She's a shepherd. She's panting, and so she was having a lot of trouble figuring out, trying to figure out, pin down that odor, right? And so here she is again, trying to pick up that odor cone. But this is how far away that odor is moving from that tree card. So now she pins it down and she's trying to figure it out. But look how long, and this is a pretty strong team. Um, a very strong dog. The handler sees the odor behavior. She gives him an alert, but he does not call it. So that's a whole nother issue. But you see how the dog had to work that problem down and how far away it went, and how much the dog had to work to get that one simple hide. And again, this is a very, very strong team. And that's how hard that dog had to work for that hide to work it down the wall. And the one on the ground, she never found that one. It was really not available. It had evaporated so much and it was blowing against the building, that the dogs were not able to pin it down there. So she did get this one at some point, but that ground one she was never able to, because the odor was blowing on the building, and there was no odor traced back to the source, because it was dissipating. It was just evaporating so quickly. So this is one of those. Again, these are things that, as a CO, you consider, and you put, but the weather's gonna, it's gonna do what it does. And this was a challenging search for the dogs. The heat played quite a big part, a big role in this setup, right? And here we have, it's warm, and you see the temperature information on there. It's 81 degrees, which is, it's really not terribly hot, to be fair. Uh, and you saw how the odor was moving and how he came in. So he did locate it there. And then here you have two more, and the dog was able to, this is a pretty good scenario and setup for those hides, right? Because he was able to go from one and pick up the other one relatively quickly. So it was a good situation for the for the for those hides, right? They worked really, really well. And he found the other ones here really quickly as well. But they were moving so far enough out that they were able to, he was able to find those out really, really quickly. So it was really nice. And you see how it says where the odor is moving, and it goes pretty far out, right? And all the way down there. So again, this was a pretty good weather condition for the dog. It was warm, but it was undercover. So you see the difference between an open in the sun, a hide, versus a hide that's undercover, and it's still warm, but it's undercover, and it really does allow the dog to work it really well, and kind of see where the odor moves, because the dog tells us where the odor is moving, right, and where it's going. So here we have that same dog coming around. This is I think a 5 hide search. um, and so here he goes out again. You can see where the odor's moving and it's dissipating to. And then here he then
Alert.
was able to make that call and move on to the rest of it. And you see where the dog is still working the dissipating odor in this environment, right? And that might be just, friends that are in there. But you see how the dog then works the rest of that odor, but you see how it's moving and collecting on all the stuff around it, and the dog has to move out. And this is where sometimes we get impatient and we don't allow the dog to make the right decisions and choices. But this is a really good example of, it was warm outside, little bright warm in that building, but the odor worked really well because it was under cover and it wasn't in direct sun. So if these would have been in direct sun, the odor behavior would be a lot different. There would be odor participating everywhere, especially with the amount of hides, or five. So those are always some things to consider when, depending on the condition, you want to think about how many hides you're setting out too, right? Because if you have one hide that dissipates is one thing, or if you have five hides that are dissipating, it's a whole nother problem, right? So you want to really think about uh, when you're placing, if you're going to do, if it's warm and dry, how many hides are you going to put? Where are they going to be close together? Are they going to be far apart? Are they going to be high, low? Those are all things to consider in your training program, because your dog should experience all of those. So in this case, this was a low hide. This was a moderately elevated hide. So and the conditions were pretty good here for this particular setup. This was a nice, warm and dry, but it wasn't in direct sun. So always so the odor is not going to dissipate as much when it's like this, right? It was a pretty easy and very smooth situation. So then in this case, this is the one where you saw that is a hide there. This was in a kind of again, very warm day. uh it's a little bit, I think this wasn't as warm. I think it was maybe in the 80s as well. So in this, you're going to see the one on the green tire in the front. It was dissipating some, so the dog needed more time to work it, and the handler didn't give her the time to work that problem. And this is where I want you guys to kind of think about it. It's like, when you're in the condition that you're in, you want to take into account, your dog may need, if they show interest, they may need more time to work out that, to pinpointing a little bit. And if they're taking long in your mind, or you're feeling they need to probably see that more often, right? She wasn't, she went right to it. The handler didn't give her the time she needed to work out that particular problem, right? And I don't believe, if I'm not mistaken, she never got back to work the other one either. But this is one of the things I want you to really think about, that, like, she didn't have the time to decide, oh, I'm going to do that, or I'm going to work on that, or I'm going to, or she didn't, she and this was an elite search, so she was probably worried about the time situation. And those are things to also consider, right? If you're if you don't have a lot of time, you're gonna you might not give the dog the time it needs to work on that. So here we have, and this is 74 degrees inside. Again, outside was a little bit less, but this is one of the things I wanted to show. The hide is up here in this blue area here. But you see where the odor is dropping on that. It looks like a desk, which is a weird place for a desk to be. And you see how this dog has to come all the way out here to catch that odor. And there's only one hide in here. That's it. And so this dog had to come all the way. That's how far the odor was dissipating in this particular setup, even though it was inside, because it was an elevated hide too, right? It was elevated. So the dog had to, so it's moving, it's going to move more and land more on things all around it. So, but this dog is a pretty experienced dog. He was able to figure out that it wasn't there. So then he had to come here and figure out that it's an elevated hide. It's kind of hard to see, so I apologize for the video, but you can see how he is trying to work it out and trying to go, pinpoint the source of the odor, which was underneath the shelf, I think, I believe, uh, in that um in that scenario. But you see how he ended up having to go far and wide and on that table to be able to catch that one hide, and you see how it moved all in that space, right? So it's that's why it's important that you know what your dog does in these different temperature situations, so that you can, you know, make adjustments, right? And make the right calls on that. So um So that's a warm and dry. So when you're practicing or you want to set up, one of the things I've done for years, and I tell all my clients is, go and set your hide in the morning, in your yard or in the front or whatever. And then you can time it. You could leave for work and see, like, throughout the day, how uh, what the environment does to that hide. But you can set a hide in the morning and a hide in the heat of the day and see how what that looks like when it disperses the odor, right? And how it disperses it, and how your dog works it, right? If you put a hide in the morning and run it and put it in the heat of the day, it's the same hide. How does the dog work those two situations, right? It's really those are pretty easy to do, and you can use timed practices too, where you could leave it for a certain amount of time and see how it affects how the time also and the environment affects that hide. And then working on concrete or uh, if you have a picnic table in the sun versus a picnic table in the under a pavilion, that matters, right? And how the dogs then um adjust to the different strengths, because it's going to be different. A hide on a picnic table under a pavilion is going to be way different than a hide in the middle of in the hot sun. So again, those things, and just because he could figure it out in one picnic table, let's say under the pavilion, and then you're like, oh, I don't understand why he didn't figure out how he didn't figure out that the other one, um, how could he took so long to figure out the other hide, right? So those are things to kind of think about when you're training, and those are things you want to log, and I would log it and see how long it takes your dog to figure those things out. Because over time, it might take your dog early on a little longer to make some of those adjustments, but as they get better at it, their time seems to will definitely get less. All right. Any questions about warm and dry and hot temperature hides and searches, right, on that?
We do have a few questions, and Nancy, if you can just project a little bit more. We have a couple people that are having a little bit of a hard time hearing you. So
Wow. Okay, will do.
I know you have the voice. Uh, can you going back to like examples of high placement and choices depending on the weather? Can you talk a little bit more in depth about that? I think, as an instructor or a CO, so that's the first question.
Sure, sure. So as an instructor, you are setting, you're setting up, you want to be mindful, like, okay, it's it's warm today, it's hot, and you don't want to be, the challenge there is if it's really hot, you don't want to have your dogs out there too long and, overwhelm them. But let's say you put, like in our case, we put a hide on a chair in the shade in the heat, and then we'll put another hide maybe on a chair in the direct sun, and then you observe how your dogs work those. Or if you have baby dogs, you do one and then you do the other. So you can then see how they work those hides and how they approach it and how where they catch those hides. So and then you would set up the same thing maybe on a rainy day, and or on a um and on a cold day. So you would set up, some of the hides would be the same, but the weather conditions would be different. That's what I have found to be the easiest, right? You set up the similar hides and different weather conditions. So then the hides are solid, the dog understands how to work the problem, but we're varying the weather condition that's going to be the challenge of that day, not the hide. Because when you're changing too many things at once, just like in any basic training, when you're changing a lot of things at the same time, then you don't know what worked or what the problem is. Because what this is, it helps you isolate what some of the problems are. So let's say you have a chair hide and you do it in the shade, you do it in the heat, you do it in the rain, you do it in the and the dogs have, you know, some trouble on it, then okay, maybe the weather is causing this to be an issue for the dog, or the wind, or something like that. So it really helps you decide where the issue is. And this is for a training perspective when you're teaching a class, when you're doing a private lesson. as a CO, you are taking you're taking everything into consideration, but this is a testing situation. So you have to you're going to get a level appropriate hide, um, and then the weather's going to be like, okay, if it's going to rain, will that hide be will be will be able to will the dogs be able to find that hide in this rain in the rain, and did I uh put it solid enough and in a good place where the dog, no matter if it rains or whatever the temperature is, the dogs will still be able to work it. So that's a little different, right? Because we're not testing, we're testing in a CO situation, and we have to make sure that no matter what the weather is, that it'll be okay. And sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes if we get a rain and maybe that particular hide might be more challenging in the rain, but and that might happen. But in training, this is where you can really figure out what the problem is for the dog. Is it the weather, or is it the hide? Or is it the flavor of the hide, right? If you do a clove one, you do an anise one. You can, from a training perspective, as an instructor, we work on, okay, we're going to work on heat, and we're going to just, and then we rotate the odors. We and then we sometimes, if the weather is raining, we're going to go out in that rain and work a hide and see how the dogs handle that. So as an instructor, you're looking, is this hide okay, and can this dog work this hide in this environment too? Or if it's taking a little longer, what can we do to help? We can use pairing, like in Michelle's workshop. We can use pairing to help them locate that particular environment. And also, some dogs are fine in all environments and other dogs are not. They don't like to search in the rain. So again, you have to work that, and you might go backwards on the hide placement, make the hide easier, so they can be more successful in the rain. So all those things, all those, you're adjusting all those knobs in your training to make sure the dogs have the skill. Because if they don't like working in the rain, you can actually put a more, I don't know, a easier hide so they're successful in that environment, instead of you're going to put a very challenging hide and it's raining and the dog really hates it. Then there's not a winner in that situation, right?
All right, we got a couple more. Um, this person was asking, in general, would you say if environmental conditions are more extreme, should you just plan that your dog might take more time to figure things out? And would a lot of your prep be building stamina for those extremes, as well as knowing how your dog reacts in extremes?
Yes. Yes, and yes. So you definitely, that's what, from a training perspective, you want to know what your dog looks like. And yes, you should plan. If you get to a get to a trial and it's pouring rain, then and your dog maybe doesn't like it and might take a little longer. You're going to give the dog the opportunity and the time to make those decisions, and just focus on that. Because I think, and this goes back to, I think a lot of us get so wrapped up in the uh in getting the title, instead of being in in the moment, in the search with the dog, and with the conditions, and thinking about that. Because I think we just thinking about finding hides. It's like, no, how is my dog going to work this situation in this weather, and focus on that part of it. So that way you can build the dog will be like, okay, she's going to give me the time I need, instead of moving off very quickly. Um, and so, yeah, you definitely want to prep that. And then, you want to be careful trying to build stamina in extreme heat and in the winter, because, those can be dangerous. But yeah, you can do a couple of short, quick hides in the heat. And then maybe later on, you could do a little bit, tad bit longer search in the heat, where the dog's going to be successful. Like you saw the shepherd, she's a very experienced dog, so she was able to handle the heat pretty well. Um, she just uh, she just couldn't pin, in that particular situation, she couldn't trace that odor that back to that ground hide, so she was not able to locate that particular hide, right? Um, but she was able to figure out the other one. But the handler did let her go far enough away to work it back, and he saw the odor behavior, so he made sure he took her back there. And granted, there was not a lot of other stuff there either, but yeah, So you want to be careful building that stamina in those extreme environments. But yes, if you know your dog has a hard time in a certain weather condition, like for me, I know in the heat, it's going to take me my dog's a little longer. I plan for it, and I plan my what I'm gonna how I'm gonna help and what I'm gonna do accordingly before I step into that to the start line.
All right, let's move on.
All right. All right. Secret word is conditions. Everybody got that? All right. Okay, here we go. Rain. Uh and this happens more often than not. And I'm not going to read this to you, but when it's heavy rain, the odor is going to move a lot more. So you're really, and this is where people lose their minds because the dog in the rain, dogs are going to slip the ground more because that odor is dropping to the ground. And in many cases, the dog is just trying to figure it out and people don't allow it. I see it as a judge and a CO all the time because that's what's going to happen in the rain, right? The odor is going to fall and they're going to move more and they're going to be um, um, more challenging. When it's humid and it's not raining, it's different. The other thing that you want to think about in rain is where pooling odor becomes a little bit more of a challenge. So what happens there is if it's raining and it's windy, if there's anything around where the odor is, it's going to stick. I call it stick. It's going to stick more because it's wet and the odor is going to hold that odor. So that becomes, and this is why as much as I dislike working in the rain, this is why we do it. So if we put a chair, it's raining and it's blowing on another chair and those chairs are wet, that odor is going to really hold onto the one chair that's not hot, right? So the dog has to really work hard to work it back to source. So when it's wetness or you do it, dew or whatever, the odor is going to stick to other things a little bit more versus in a dry, it's going to blow through it and you don't have to worry about it. So that's a definitely something to work on in the rain because that's where we see, and I'm going to show you some videos that'll show that'll mimic that, right? But it's something, and this is where sometimes in the rain is where we get some false alerts, right? Which we don't want those. Those are bad. All right. So we have it's pouring. It's very wet. The hide is in this particular, I guess, doohickey there. So here he comes. So you see the dog is really hitting the outside of where it's at. He's hitting the outside. That odor is sticking to all those things because it's really the rain, as you can see, it's really coming down. And so he's hitting everything around that in that space. And you see where it's sticking, and the dog is kind of trying to work it back. The handler is giving him and this is a tight space too on top of it. So here the dog gives her the information she needs, uh, and she pays, right? But you saw this dog was all around that particular the outside of where the hide was. So then here we have same search. It's not raining anymore. You could see it's starting to dry up. Different team, because remember, everybody doesn't always get the same search, right? But this particular dog isn't really seeing interested in the outside of the area outside of the um of the gazebo. She's not interested in checking it at all. And look at they got yeses on both sides, but that's because that's how much the odor was moving. But she did not go, even though the handler didn't give, the handler was still pretty good about letting her um she could have got she was not interested in checking all this out around it like the other dog was when it was really raining hard. So those are again things to think about when you're in, because this is the same trial, same, but the ways that and the dogs were relatively the same size, or the size differential wasn't big. And so this is kind of how it, what it looked like, right? Very, very interesting little, um, so I thought that was really cool because these are some of our clients. And they're not all my students, but they're clients, and they I asked them for video, and I just happened to get these two, and I'm like, oh my god, how cool is this to see the different same search, different dogs, different and in different weather conditions because it was different for that, and where the how the dogs worked it and the calls they made was really great. I thought it was really very interesting. All right, here we have same shepherd, and this is what I'm talking about the so it's raining as you can see, uh and how the and it's a little bit, a little bit of wind, and see how that rain is affecting. This is the hide is right here in the front of this tire, and how the dog is having to work that odor, right? It's wet, it's moving all over, and it's sticking on different parts of the car, and she's trying to figure it out because it's not super windy, but it's just enough for her to try to make that call. So here we go. She hits it, but you see her trying to figure it out and sort it before alerting, and see how she's on the floor, on the ground, and then she makes a decision. And I think we see that when we see that, and then we start worrying that and I've seen it many times where people stop the dog and say, stop sniffing the ground. The dog was actually working the odor, and they've missed a hide because of it. So you need to know, and that's why as much working in the rain is challenging, but unfortunately it's what we get a lot of, more than um snow, because but that's a perfect example of she was sniffing she needed to sniff the floor to work that back to the tire because it's been raining. And I don't know what number they were on their on this in this trial, but it could have been sitting there, and the longer it sits there and the further down you are on that, the longer it's going to pool on the ground. So, and I know people worry about peeing and all these other things, but this is why it's so important to work on these particular problems as you move on, right? And here we have, I apologize, I did not turn off the volume on this, but here we go. So you see, we talked about sticking. I'm going to tell you, the hide is all the way over here on the top, but because it's raining, this dog, that odor has been, and you could hear the wind blowing, and it's blowing this way. You can see how that odor is sticking to that picnic table. And this is where we might get a false alert on on a particular search, because the odor is just that much stickier on in this situation, right? So it's really, really important. So the dog's all over the table, the picnic table, and he's diligently checking it, and he's checked both of them out, and it's not the best weather ever, but you see how he's kind of uh working it, and where he's working it, and then before he gets to where it was. But you hear the wind and how it was blowing. But this is where you get the situation. And again, this she didn't call the hide very quickly, but that's where the hide is. Um, and she was a little worried about calling that, but we're not we're not talking about that. We're just talking about how the odor moves. But you see the picnic tables and how the odor is moving, and you see the flags moving in that direction. And this is why she had a little bit of a there's a little bit of a challenge here at the tables, and where people might have called would have called the wrong they would have called a picnic table, because the dog was pretty earnestly checking it, right? So it's always this is a really nice setup, right, for training. You can in the rain have it blowing for a while, because I don't know, again, I don't know what number this dog was in the running order, but it's depending on how long it's been sitting there. So it's important to practice. When you're working temperature, you also want to work time, how long it's sitting there, how long you've worked it's been working there or sitting in the wet and all that. It does matter how you do that, because we just don't know if you know we don't know when we're going to be when it's going to be our turn. We don't know what we are in the running order. So Practices for humidity and rain. So if you live in a high humidity situation, early mornings with dew on the ground or just after a rain shower when it's higher, like work that out. Rain, do like light rain or a drizzle. And this is where that question came back from the sprinkler. You can do a sprinkler like where it's, you know, the sprinkler's hitting it every once in a while. And if you live in a place where it doesn't rain all the time, and then and see how the dogs handle, and then turn it off, have the rain sit in the sprinkler system, and then turn it off, and then go in there and search and see what that looks like. So these are all short little scenarios you can set up pretty easily at home to work that out, and just get a good idea. Again, this is if you don't live in a place that has, lots of rain like we do. um all right, wind and air movement. So we work this often and a lot. So you want to kind of think about what you how the odor moves in a large, and how windy it is, and because it makes a difference. If it's a the velocity of the wind makes a big difference. If it's a flat open field with a lot of wind, that odor is going to travel really far. If it's short and it hits different places, or it has along a tree line, it's going to work differently. And if it's a really strong, like gale force winds, it's really going to, for the dogs to catch that odor is going to be really, really challenging. And also, obviously, calm condition where there's no wind. That's the perfect storm, right? You guys have a great, no, a mild little wind, and it just makes the searching just pretty and perfect and beautiful. So, but one of the things that we want to definitely work is work the wind, and how the air is going to move the wind and the odor. So I'm going to give you a couple of I'm going to give you this was in a cold and it was a little windy. You can hear the wind. Sorry about that again. But the dog was not able to really locate the hide because the wind was blowing, and you see how he's coming off of it because that's where the odor's blowing, and the handler's really not allowing him to go that way. So it's just information, right? He just needed that to be able to do that. So on the way back, there's two hides in the search, and she just needed some time or he needed to be able to catch the wind. And this is why on containers, this is where it's a challenge. The dogs do need and this is again, dog driven. This is why the dogs need a little bit more freedom to be able to work those hides, because the wind was blowing so hard that the dog was not able to catch it and be able to work that wind. I apologize for that, but it gives you a good idea of how much it was blowing. And then he got both of those hides, but not allowing, he might have got that had she allowed him to move out and away. So I'm going to show you an exercise that we use very, very often, all the time. And we find it very, very helpful in helping the dogs work back to source inside and out. But this exercise is mostly outside. So uh, we work on it outside. So you can put depending on the wind directions, how they cross the scent, when they get it. And I'm going to show you a video on how to do that. And then, train on different days. This is really challenging because because you don't know when you're going to have a super windy day, and sometimes you have it on if you're an instructor, it's really hard. So what you can do, you can try to use a fan outside. It's not the same, but it's better than nothing. But ideally you want it, where it's, if you have a good wind or whatever, this is a great place to work it. So, and these are different, you want to definitely work on open field and sheltered areas. It matters, both of those things are important. The dogs need to be able to, because in an open field, that odor moves pretty straight, pretty easy, and it's easy for the dog to catch, versus like a pavilion or something like that. So what I've done is, in this particular, uh, and these are little things that affect the airflow, which I think most of you should be familiar with. This is straight, this is turbulent, it hits obstacles and stuff. And you definitely want to work on a lot more turbulent airflow because that's a lot more challenging. and the scent cone, which we talk about, where the dogs go long distances to work it. And then also when there's turbulent air along a tree line or things like that, you want to next to an open field. So if you've got that available, work that. So here's a video of, and again, I apologize for not turning off the sound. Um, Here we have a video, and it's an exercise we call point to point. We had one of our judges here is a detection person, and he came up. He taught us this exercise. We use it all the time. It's really really awesome. So basically, this is my shepherd. There's no odor. He's not. There's no odor. Then he catches it, and there's a pole there. We use a pole. Ideally, you want to use a chain link fence, which is easier, and the hide is on that pole, and the dog catches the odor and goes to it, and you see the flag where the dog catches it. So here I'll show you again. So he's walking along. So you're walking perpendicular to the where the odor is moving. So he's not really picking up any odor. There's nothing until he picks it up because the wind blows, and then he catches it, and then he then goes, oh, okay. Uh, there it is. And then he goes, then he's catching it. Right. And ideally you want to do this in the beginning, you do it relatively close, and then you go further and further away, so that way the dog understands he has to go all the way to odor. And this is where you might use a larger volume of odor, maybe, I don't know, instead of 3 Q-tips, use 6 or 7 or more, so the dog can catch it. Ideally I like to use a chain link fence if you can get it, like, because the flag, eventually the dogs become very they get pretty smart. They're like, oh, I see the flag. I think it's over there. So a chain link, it's hard to do that. But in this case, this was Chicago. The wind was not in our favor, so um, we had to work it. So this is the same exercise, different dog. And there she goes. And she was a little bit more advanced, and boom, she goes to the odor. And then that's why you wanted to look, right? Really fast, the dog goes right to odor. We've done this exercise many times, uh, many times, and so we practice it quite a lot. But in this day, we did not have, we just didn't have the wind in our favor to get it. So, and again, every dog had a different approach and a different way to work it.
What a good girl.
So this is one, and then once they get really good at this and they can go from a relatively far distance, then this is when you start to add other things in front of it. And if you have if you want to bring stuff out, or we use the pavilions in the park. So we put a hide, if the wind's blowing one direction, we put the hide in that direction, and then we approach it where it's bouncing off all the picnic tables and stuff, so the dog gets to odor. So, and this really helps strengthen the dog's ability to go to source. And we do it in the rain, and we do it in the snow, and we do it in the heat. And by far and large, doing it in the heat when there's no wind is very challenging for the dogs. But it helps the dogs really understand locating the scent cone, if you will, or the scent plume, and then going to the scent, to the source of the odor. So really important, on that, because that's a really big, that's an important uh, piece of getting them to be familiar. So ideally, you want to have a big open field like we had here. Again, I used you can use those garden stakes too, where they're a little thinner and harder to see. Because the bigger the object, the dogs are just gonna go, they're gonna see, or if you want to if you don't have a choice, you can have a bunch of flags and they have to pick the right one. So whatever works. But this is a really wonderful exercise, and it really helps the dogs get really good at going to source. My lab specifically, they tend to chase odor a lot, so it was really important for me to help her with that. The shepherd doesn't usually doesn't have that issue. So this is a really fun, easy exercise you can work on. You can do it anywhere, and it pays off in dividends. And you can do it in the rain and in the again in the heat is the most challenging, to be fair. All right. In summary, just make sure you understand uh, how that odor is going to behave in that particular search environment so that you can see what your dog does, and then you can adapt what you need to do to help your dog get better at it. So if your dog is having a little trouble with a certain hide, make the hide easier in that heat. Let's say, for example, if it's hot, make it easier, set up for success, and then build on that. And just always test them on different things that they can work on. And and you need to anticipate it, and then when you learn it and you understand how, when you go to trial, it's going to become second nature for you. You're going to be like, okay, this is how he might end up working this hide, or this is how he might end up, or this is what I need to do to help with the search, right? All right, that's all I have. I know there's a ton more I could talk about and do, but um I can talk and talk and talk, as everybody knows, who knows me. So I'm trying to be good about being on time. This is my information. Please, if you have any questions, or you can reach out anytime, and I'm happy to answer any questions. And if you want to put questions that maybe I couldn't get to on the Facebook page, please do. I know I'm going to answer some more questions now, but in case I don't get to them, or something comes up, or you think about it later on, feel free. I'm happy to do that. I'm also going to upload. I got permission from Dana. I'm also going to upload a little cheat sheet that you can have with you, that says, just to give you like some reminders initially. So I will put that file in the Facebook page, so you guys can have access to it, and just use it or not, but it just gives you a little bit more information, and it just gives you, just to remind you, like, oh, what you're doing and what you're working on. So thank you so much. Any questions?
Yeah, thanks so much, Nancy. We do have some. Um, we have a few about the point-to-point exercise, and the
Sure.
first one is, why is it called point-to-point?
Because you're going from one point to the other. I don't know why they call it that. I'm gonna be honest. That's what the police call it. I don't know. This is where and so that's what he calls it. And it's just because you're walking, you're going from, you're starting off, and it's like, this is the point where they pick it up, and this is the point where they get to odor. And
Yeah.
again, for my lab, this is the next, and for my baby lab that I have now, we do it often because we have to uh we have to be able to, because labs tend to chase odor a lot, and this helps shorten how far they go out to grab that odor cone. So I really like it for that. It's really helpful. So I don't know why they call it that, but yeah, they pick it up at one point. You saw the dog. My shepherd was more clear. He was sniffing the ground, doing his thing, and then he goes, "Oh, there's odor." That also speaks to, how odor obedient is your dog. If you can smell an odor that far away, is he gonna pay attention to it or not? Good inform. It's good
And
information on all fronts, right?
do you always walk into the wind so you're downwind of the hide?
You're walking, if the odor's coming downwind, you're walking across it, not.
Crosswind, okay.
Yeah, crosswind. Yep, across it. You're walking. So if your dog is here, or the wind is coming this way, you're walking this way. The dog should catch it, turn, and go to it. Didn't look like that because it was a hard angle, but that's what we were doing.
All right. And could you use trees to set up your point-to-point exercise? Could you
Sure.
use a tree?
Yep, you can. And also, for those of you who are instructors, you can do this exercise on primary as well. It's really effective because all it's teaching is the dog to follow the scent cone, and then you're just going to replace it with um with odor when you get to that point. But we do this with our baby dogs pretty often. We use a tin that's not been used for odor, that's food. We stick it on there, and there's the primaries there, and they self-reward, and they start to
Fantastic.
learn. They learn that concept really early on, so it's really cool.
There's a request for you to possibly sketch the point-to-point exercise out and put on the Facebook page. So if
I
you
can
have
do
time to
that.
do that,
Sure, I can
that
do
would
that.
be helpful.
Yeah, I can totally do that. That would be, yeah, it's pretty easy and the setup is easy. Yeah, I can totally do that. Absolutely.
Can you
Yeah.
talk a little bit about dogs that are noise sensitive? Because oftentimes with wind or rain, they're also being affected by the sound.
Right. So, really great question, whoever that. So, I'm going to be honest, because we do have a lot of dogs that come here that have either reactivity issues or they have sensitivity issues. I would work on those things first and get them more comfortable and just do really straight, fast, easy ones on outside if it's, the wind, whatever. And I currently have a little beagle that's a little bit noise sensitive. So and it's specific. She's worried about thunder and all that. So I've been playing thunder low, a little bit low on fireworks in my house every once in a while and while she's getting a yummy chewy. Um and I noticed, and I do it maybe once a week. And I noticed the other day she was outside in my house going to the potty, and we had a fireworks go off and explode. Before, she would have just been terrified and run into the house. This time, she did acknowledge it. She looked in that direction, and then still went ahead and did her business, which I was thrilled. So it's a slower process for those dogs, uh, but you have to do that prep work first, right? With the wind and all that. And you can put sounds of wind and all that stuff to help them get more comfortable. And, like I say, I put it on, like I give her something to chew, a puzzle or something, and I put it on in the background really quietly. And I just do that every once in a while. And that seems to have made a difference for her because before the fireworks would have sent her just running, and this time she acknowledged it and then just uh, was able, and this was we weren't doing nose work. She was just going to the bathroom. So and then the other thing is do those things away from nose work, right? Like like I do it when she's chewing, away from nose work, because you don't want to develop that association between doing nose work and that scary thing. So as much as you can do away from nose work and make sure when she does nose work, it's pretty controlled and you can help her build that confidence, right? And like we've had a dog that it was raining and she was scared a little bit of the rain. We just put a chair right outside the door with a hide. So we had her out, go out, find the hide, come back in. That was it. That's kind of we really small baby steps to get her. And now she doesn't love it, but she can work in the rain and she's not worried and afraid. Because that's the other thing. You don't want anything that you do that's going to cause them to be afraid and worried. So we try to eliminate that as much as we can.
All right, last one. When it's wet, um, as a judge or in your observations, do you see odor stick more to other areas near the source and people calling fringe calls more often?
Um, Usually what we see on those is not stick around. Yeah, it can. Um, but not really. In NACSW, I think we've done a pretty good job. I mean, I suppose you can, but if it's, I think it depends on the wind and all that. But no, a lot of times we see it when it's across from it, not so much near, on that side. It's across from it. Sometimes you'll get a false. Yeah. Yeah. Because it's sticky. That's why you want to work on it. And that's why we work on those a lot. Because that's where pooling gets a little trickier, right? Pooling odor is part of nose work, will be forever, and no matter what level you're in, you're gonna always have it. But when it rains, it can become a little more challenging, right? And as a CO, as you saw, that CO and with that boxer, she did a really nice job of placing the hide downwind. And yes, it was sticking on the tables, but not enough for that dog to call a false alert, right? The dog knew there's no source there. And that's what we're training it. And that's why with practice, that's what you're training. There might be a higher concentration, but not enough. There's no source there. And that's what the dogs have to understand. That's not source. This is source. Right. So yeah, that's from a training perspective. Yeah, I've seen it, but it's not been a huge problem. I think as instructors, we're all doing a better job of helping our folks get better at that. So yes, it happens, but I think a lot of the time it's not because the dog alerted, it's because the handler saw the interest on that table and they call it, right? It's not that the dog gave them an alert. It's not the dog falsing, it's the handler's falsing, which is a little different.